Hello and welcome to the JackCast, your Swansea City podcast. I'm your host, Steve Carroll. Apologies, we've been a bit quiet recently. Real life has got in the way. But yes, we are now able to bring you another episode. And I'm glad it's going to be a bit more positive than the ones that we may have done recently. So that's good. And I'm also delighted to say that Tom Coleman from Wales Online is joining me as a guest this week. Afternoon, Tom.
Afternoon, Steve. How are we?
I'm not bad, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. A little bit better now, despite a disappointing result at the weekend. But feeling a little bit more, dare I say, a little bit more positive about things. I don't know about you.
Yeah, definitely. We've seen some positive steps, I would say. Even though the result didn't go great on Saturday, but we'll get into all of it, of course. But let's start with the worst thing first. West Brom. We're not going to go into too much detail on this because it was a couple of weeks back now, but I feel like we are going to have to talk about it. I mean, what to say? I mean, we've scored early on, which is a slight understatement. 12 seconds, one of our fastest ever goals. Then we're two up, and we're looking good. There's some optimism, and then it all went wrong, really, didn't it? I mean, but let's start with to start with. I mean, you could never imagine being one up inside 12 seconds and then two up in 12, particularly for a team that had been struggling. I mean, it was a dream start. It's just a shame it didn't last, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And I mean, it's quite difficult to assess this game in the context of the games that have happened since, because I think the main thing I think you could take away from that West Brom game was a fragility about Swansea. Yes, they raced into that 2-goal lead. Although, to be honest, I think there's a big caveat there in that Galbraith's goal. You've got to say keeper's got to do a bit better there from a West Brom point of view. But they do the hard work to get themselves 2-0 up. It sort of did okay in the first half, I thought. I'm not sure they necessarily deserved a 2-goal lead. But I think what was really disappointing on the day was, as soon as West Brom's first goal went in, it suddenly became very, very nervy. And I think the feeling on the day was that once that first West Brom goal goes in, it's sort of going to turn into a bit of a squeaky bum affair from a Swans point of view. And sure enough, they just completely fell apart in the second half. Really, really poor. And I think on the day we saw some flashes of what Vito wants to do, flashes that I think, to be honest, they've kind of built on since. But yeah, it was there were too many old habits, I think, on the day without going into too much detail. A really disappointing day that, as we mentioned, promised so much in that first half.
Yeah, I think the frustrating thing for me is that, I mean, this really isn't rocket science. I mean, at half time, we're all, relatively happy. We're having discussions in the concourse between me and a few mates. And what we're all saying is, whatever you do, do not concede early on in this second half. The pressure will build. The opposition fans were chanting at 2-0 about how they're not fit to wear the shirt. I mean, you just know the pressure is going to build at that point, but we've conceded after 3 minutes, and then I think it was within 10, it's 2-2, and it's just, it's fairly obvious what you need to do at that point. If you can get it to the hour mark and you're still 2-0, they're going to have to risk far more. Space will appear, and then you've got a chance to really kill the game. But we just started on the back foot. West Brom made 4 subs, and from the moment it went to 2-2, there was only ever going to be one winner, really, wasn't it? And I think the only surprise was it did take a long time for that winner to come.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much there is to add to that, Steve. To be honest, I mean, like I said, I thought they were just that second half in particular. We just saw too many previously bad habits, and Matos I think he's spoken about that before. On the back of a couple of games lately, there is still plenty of work to be done. But it was too passive in midfield, no creativity in the final third, and as I said, just so fragile. Just looked so fragile at the back, and as you said, I mean, yeah, okay, at 2-2, you could say there's only going to be one winner, but you could. even after the first went in, I think you could see West Brom getting back into the game, and Swansea just had no real way of turning that tide around. But I think it's important not to dwell on this too much, just because the games that have happened since for Swansea have been a lot more positive, I think, and I think we are now starting to see some real signs of progress. Although I think there probably are small signs of progress towards what Vitor Matos wants to implement.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those where we had to touch on it, but I don't want to go into it too much because a lot has happened since, and there were some mental scars. I can assure you that the journey home from there was very somber. And I was just thinking to myself, our confidence was fragile before this game. To go from 2-0 to 3-2 the wrong way, you're just thinking, God, this could be hugely damaging here. But I'm glad to say that's not been the case. It was still a miserable journey home, but things have improved since. And obviously, the game after that was Oxford visited. SA1. It did feel like a big game, particularly, well, a big two games at home with us facing teams around us in the table. I think what we saw was definitely an improvement, wasn't it, Tom? I mean, what sort of is a delicious irony is that we scored our first goal from a set piece all season, and our previous manager was the set piece coach who couldn't really make that one up. But between that and obviously Josh Timon set one up and then scored a ridiculously good volley to settle it. There were positives, weren't there? Particularly in the first half, I thought. I mean, we didn't create a huge amount, but I could see patterns of play. We kept the ball better, moved it better, and like you said, I think small steps really, but good ones nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on Timon's goal, but I mean, both goals came from set pieces on the day, and I thought there was a lot more. It was a lot more control about Swansea on the day. I thought it wasn't a flawless performance by no means, but I think there were really improved showings from. I mean, Omji Sung, I thought had one of his better games in a Swans shirt. Um, looked looked very much up to the level in a way that I think he probably hasn't been in previous weeks before that. I think the only caveat really is Oxford were pretty poor on the day, and I think that's the sort of game where if Swansea hadn't got anything from, that's when you really start to get concerned. Um, but I thought the counter press was much better, and obviously Vitor Matos has spoken about that a lot. Being a student of Jurgen Klopp, it's clearly something that's very, very important to the way he wants to play. So Swansea were much, much better out of possession, but in possession, I thought they were much better too. Tried to break the lines a bit more. As I said, it still wasn't completely flawless. There's still plenty of room for improvement. But I going into that game, I wasn't quite sure what was going to be more important, the performance or the result. I think from in the context of the season, you've got to say the result was probably the most important thing. Just get a win, because a defeat there would have really, really taken the mood down to, well, would have plummeted to another level, I think. But I did think the performance itself was improved, and I thought we saw similar signs as well of progress against Portsmouth in midweek. But look, I mean, we haven't even talked about Josh Timon's goal yet. I mean, what an incredible strike! That's a goal that's worthy of winning absolutely any game. I don't think he'll actually ever hit one quite as sweetly as that ever again. And the disbelief on the faces of his teammates was really something to behold. So it was just a nice all round positive afternoon, really, on a day where Swansea really, 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 really needed something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've touched again then on the time and goal. I mean, it's mad this season. The Swans have not been good going forward at all, in my view. But we have scored a lot of screamers. I mean, you think to Franco at Blackburn, there were two from Vipotnik against Norwich. But I mean, this one has to be the best one, doesn't it? I mean, like I say, there is something sweet about a volley, particularly from a left footer, I would say. And I don't,
Mm.
like you said, I don't think we're going to see him strike one like that again in his whole career. I mean, I think pretty much every player dreams of a goal like that, don't they? And yeah, it was some strike, and I think it would be quite a big shock if that doesn't win our goal of the season.
I mean, flipping heck, if there's a goal better than that, I mean, it's going to be really quite something to behold. But yeah, no, I think, well, not just for Swansea, I think you can make a case it's the best in the Championship, at least so far, at least anyway. But yeah, no, I really, really, those are the sorts of moments that I think you really, really hope for as a fan, that you want to. That's what you pay your ticket money for, to see moments like that. And it's not, as I said earlier, it's not just about results, is it? There's not been just an awful lot of excitement in general. One of the things that stuck out to me when Matos got the job was a quote that he had when he was still Maritimo boss, where he wants to make fans feel excited about the next game. And I'm not sure we're necessarily at that point yet, but that is a feeling that I think Swansea fans haven't really had for a little while. Possibly towards the end of last season, when they're on that great run under Sheehan. But I think even that's probably a bit of a stretch. So it's nice to have those kind of moments of real quality that get you out your seat, and it's something you can talk about on that journey home.
Yeah, I think for me, the first step is always to make me go into a game that and not dread it, and I'm not dreading
Mm.
them as much now. So that is that's the first positive to look at way to look at it. The enjoyment might comes a little bit later, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
the dread has been there on a few games recently, and it's not
yeah.
not a particularly great feeling, is it? But I think the Oxford game was probably better than the Portsmouth game. I mean, that felt like a real game of attrition. There was not a lot of quality on show, it's fair to say, but the game was
Mm.
settled by a moment of quality. Another, a nice move, I would say, and a very good finish from Liam Cullen, and that was by far the standout moment in what was a drab affair. You can't imagine many neutrals would have enjoyed that one, can you?
No, I don't. It's funny, isn't it? Because, like you said, both sides really kind of struggled to create anything, and yet I always kind of got the feeling Swansea was sort of in control of the game. They certainly seemed to have the better of Portsmouth in midfield. Yes, Portsmouth were very competitive, but they did seem happy to kind of try and sit back and hit Swansea on the break through the pace of Murphy, and that did cause problems at times. But aside from that, I thought Swansea were largely in control without necessarily doing a lot with it. And you could see that they were trying to do the right things, trying to play through the lines, trying to keep the ball moving and act quickly. And the other thing I didn't mention about the Oxford game was the whole Ethan Galbraith at right back thing, which we saw again against Portsmouth, and he was excellent there once again, and it's kind of opened up a bit of a debate now as to what's going to happen with that right back position, because it's becoming a little bit of an issue. Josh Key's completely lost form, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in a second. Sam Parker is in the thinking, but clearly isn't seen as sort of a sort of first team choice at the moment. But I thought against Portsmouth he was excellent. I thought against Oxford he was excellent. And moving out to right back certainly didn't harm his influence on things. But I can understand why some people want to see him in the centre of midfield, because that's kind of where his skill set, I think, is probably best suited. But as I said, it certainly didn't harm his impact on the game, both against Portsmouth and Oxford. But I think the pleasing thing about the Portsmouth game for me, most of all, was the impact of the subs. Liam Cullen coming off the bench, and he's come in for a bit of stick lately, hasn't he? Both for club and country at times. And so nice to see him get on the score sheet. He's someone who's always given his all for Swansea City. So it was a lovely moment for him. And Matos actually said after that game, one of the things that's going to be most important to getting Swansea up the table is getting everyone involved. Everyone has a role to play, whether they're in the first 11 or on the bench or whatever. And there were times under Sheehan certainly that we didn't have that impact off the bench, and it was quite frustrating at times. Or as I think we saw, I think was the case a few times. Substitutes were perhaps sometimes introduced too late. They were too reactive to make a difference. So yeah, there was a lot of. It was a drab game, but I still think there were quite a few positives to take from it, as I've just outlined there.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, really. I mean, you can get games that are maybe a low on quality, but you see plenty of endeavour and commitment. And I mean, the subs is a good point. I mean, I remember Yao Koué at the end of the game, basically running his backside off, trying to close people down. And sometimes that is just what you need from substitutions. You might not need them to show you the moments of quality, because if you're trying to hang on to a lead, maybe you just need them to work really hard and to put themselves about a bit. And that was probably what was needed there as an example, really. And I think it's a fair point. Sheehan was poor with subs. I think there were a few occasions where with Birmingham away was an example where they were made too late and then reactive after they've got the late winner. And, it's pointless. I remember Waddell coming on, I think it was for Franco when we were hanging on against Hull right at the end. And I was thinking, well, this isn't really the type of sub that we should be making at this time, really. But no, the subs did make, a real impact in this game. And, that obviously it's helped us to pick up another big 3 points. I mean, you touched on Oxford earlier. We'll talk about Portsmouth. I mean, for a team that, you're looking at the Swans, maybe thinking we could be dragged into trouble. They're two teams that, in my opinion, are worse than us. I mean, they didn't show a lot at all at the end. That should give Swansea confidence that they will finish above those two at least. And realistically, Sheffield Wednesday, I think we can more or less say are down already, given their points deduction. So it should give the Swans confidence that they're not going to be really dragged into a relegation battle in the way that we look like we might have been a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and look, confidence I think has been a big problem in recent weeks, and Matos admitted that himself. I mean, it's a lot easier to implement new ideas when with a team that's got confidence. But the flip side of that is you you often don't get a manager who brings new ideas unless a previous manager has lost their job or moved on, and that very often means as a new manager you're walking into a dressing room low on confidence. So it is a bit of a tricky one. But those two wins you hope are going to be um, some sort of a platform to build on. And I know obviously we'll come to the Stoke game in a sec, but the away form is still something that needs to be addressed. But I still think even the Stoke game, I came away from it, yes, disappointed that Swansea couldn't get a positive result, but there was still quite a lot to like. I thought about that performance. I think again you can kind of see some signs of progress. It was a tightly contested game as well. I think had it ended in a draw, I don't think either side could really have complained. But there's definitely a lot more impetus about Swansea at the moment, and as I keep saying, there's still lots to improve on, and they're by no means the finished article. And there's still a lot of work to be done over this festive period to try and further bring themselves away from trouble and hopefully get to the relative safety of mid-table. But I think the last couple of weeks have kind of left me feeling a lot more positive than I had done maybe a couple of months ago.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they felt like big games, didn't they? I mean, there were two sides at home around us in the
Mm.
table. And then you're looking at the next period of games where obviously Stoke, which we'll come on to, and it was ended in a defeat. Wrexham, Coventry away, which, I mean, realistically, any sort of result there would be positive. You could be going into a period of pressure there. And if we hadn't got those couple of results, it was looking like a bleak Christmas period, really, wasn't it? But those two wins now, they've just lifted some pressure, bought them out of just some time. And generally, everybody is feeling a bit more positive now, aren't they?
Yeah, and positivity is massive, especially for the sake of going out and taking on teams like Coventry. If you feel more confident about things and feel confident in the system and what you're being asked to do, it really helps when you're coming up against some of the better teams. And Stoke was a bit of a funny one because obviously they came into that game 3 games without, well, I think it was 3 defeats, was it? 3 defeats on the spin, but, still very much a side that are kind of in the mix for the top 6, and, I fully expect them to be there or thereabouts at the end of the season. Um, and Swansea, I thought, competed with them quite well. I think, those are the sorts of games that you want to be measuring Swansea up. You don't want to be talking about like, oh, we have to beat these 2 poor teams around us. You don't want to be basing your season around that. You want to be competing with the better teams in this division, and coming away with that you've fallen just short of perhaps taking on one of these better teams or whatever, or even going and beating some of these teams. That's what this squad I think should be expecting. That's I think what a lot of fans are kind of hoped for this season. Obviously, it hasn't quite turned out that way. I mean, I'm not entirely sure exactly. I mean, I'm sure you'll have your own ideas on how you feel, or what you feel like the aims for the rest of the season should be. But to me, it feels frustrating. There's still an element of frustration about how the season has kind of almost passed Swansea by a little bit, and wrestling with that and sort of getting people excited about again has been obviously one of the key challenges that Vitor Matos has got. But that game on Friday night against Wrexham, if they win that will generate plenty more excitement, I think, and hopefully build up a bit more momentum. But like I said, it's the away form really that needs addressing.
Yeah, I think it does generally, but luckily the next game is at home, so that gives us a chance. Before we come on to Stoke, I just generally wanted to have a chat with you about Alan Sheehan, and the whole
Mm.
managerial situation. Really, I mean, how did you see it? Did you think it was the right move to dispense with him, and what did you make of how, Vito Matos getting the job, and how it came about? Really, I mean, we've it appears that Kim Hellberg was the first choice, obviously, and his coaches are still not here. It's it hasn't gone as smoothly as what the club would have liked, I don't think, is it?
No, no, it hasn't. Well, look, I mean, let's start with Sheehan first, shall we? I mean, I was a little bit surprised, but I wasn't shocked, if that makes sense. I think the direction of travel, I think, was heading that way. And with the international break, it kind of made sense to to make a change. But at the same time, I think it was the manner of that defeat against Ipswich, wasn't it? Really, the mood really did turn quite significantly, and I think before that, the dissent against Sheehan wasn't anywhere near as vocal as it was on that day, and I think Sheehan himself was probably a little bit surprised by that. I think I mean, he knew that he was under pressure to try and turn things around. He knew that supporters weren't necessarily very happy with the standard of performances, but I think.
Do you want to know the truth is? Can I butt in here slightly a second? Do you remember the Norwich home game where Potnick scored the second?
Mm,
Obviously, he scored 2 screamers in that game. We won 2-1. At that moment,
mm.
just before that goal, the crowd were about to turn, and the same thing happened at Charlton. Like, we got a goal. So it's quite interesting that, like, twice really, he got bailed out of the crowd really going in on him, I think, and then particularly on that day against Ipswich, obviously that was when it happened.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, those are the kind of fine margins that often present themselves, don't they, when you're a manager under pressure? And but I think that really was. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt that was the first time that the mood had really properly turned against him, and I think the manner of that defeat. Obviously Ipswich are a very good team, but they were so feeble on the day, and the manner of it, I think, always meant that there were going to be questions. I personally thought, and speaking to people at the club at the time, I personally thought he was going to get a little bit more time than he was eventually afforded. But I mean, the difficulty with Sheehan was I didn't really see where the turnaround was going to come from. I mean, poor results are one thing, but the underlying numbers weren't great either. And you know, I think I've been on this pod before this season talking about how bad some of the attacking stats were. So I mean, we won't go over it again, but I mean, some of the stats there are the worst in the division. And when you think about how much money Swansea have invested in the summer, it's just not acceptable, is it? But I think from Sheehan's point of view, there wasn't anything really to cling on to. There wasn't really anything to point to and say, well, look, we can still, if this goes right, if this keeps going right, and we can just work on this, yada yada yada. The fundamentals just didn't seem to be there, and I think because of that, I think it was only a matter of time. And in terms of Hellberg, look, I mean, Hellberg came very very close to getting the job last time. It's my understanding that Sheehan's the form that was seen under Sheehan was the main reason that the club opted for him. This time around, Tom Gorringe met with Hellberg and his representatives in London. There was definitely enthusiasm on both sides to get an agreement in, but it was made clear to me. I assume made clear to Swansea as well. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just speculating on that, but I assume it was made clear that there were others in the picture. I mean, that was always kind of the noise. Hellberg had attracted interest from several other Championship teams, and as it turns out, Middlesbrough were one of the keener ones. And I think it still kind of took Swansea by surprise a little bit. I think they left some of those meetings pretty confident that Hellberg was going to join. And then obviously, news filters through that he's chosen Middlesbrough. Big blow, I think, and they've had to pivot quite significantly to Vitor Matos. Now, how Vitor Matos came up on the radar, I'm not entirely sure. Tom Gorringe said when Matos was unveiled that data was quite a big part of that. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, I've got to be honest, just because the man's only had 12 games, is it, as a first team coach for Maritimo in the second tier of Portugal. So I'm not entirely sure how you can make a decision based on data with such a small pool of numbers, and a pool of numbers that, with respect to the Portuguese second tier, is a weaker league than the Championship. But all that aside, he's a very well respected coach, and as I said earlier on, he's a student of Jurgen Klopp's. Klopp certainly seemed to be a very very keen admirer of his, and I think we've kind of seen some of the ideas that Klopp likes to implement in terms of the way that Matos himself likes to play football. But the concern at the moment is getting his backroom staff in. I mean, it seems that is going to happen now. Obviously, there's been a bit of a fuss over them getting work permits and things like that due to Brexit. And so, it hasn't been as smooth as it probably should have been. Certainly, it will open up questions over the director of football situation. Obviously, Richard Montague left, and the implication was at the time that Adam Worth and Tom Gorringe were going to be responsible for these kind of negotiations and indeed the search for a new manager. But the noises coming out of the club now suggest that maybe they've changed their mind on that. Maybe a director of football is going to be part of the hierarchy, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. But these things are seemingly never easy with Swansea City, are they?
No, it doesn't feel like it. I mean, it's well known that I think that Sheehan shouldn't have had it, and probably Hellberg should have. And look, it is what it is. The most important thing is that they have now acted, and I think we've made a good appointment. Obviously, all appointments carry some sort of risk, but I'd much rather go down this route than some of the ones that we've gone down recently. And I really think if we have a solid rest of the season, give him a pre-season where he can work on the fitness levels, then I'm optimistic that next year will be better. But it's just general frustration really over appointing Sheehan, and it's probably going to waste another season, but it is what it is. Right, we're going to wrap up part one here, and then on part two we'll come on to the Stoke game, a bit about the fans forum, and any other general business, and look ahead to the first Swans Wrexham League game for over 2 decades. So stay tuned. So Tom, the Swans travelled up to Stoke on Saturday. not a happy hunting ground, to say the least. I think they put the stat up on the screen during the game of last 13 visits, 9 defeats, 3 draws, 1 win, and that win was behind closed doors, which probably says it all, really. But even though it didn't really go to plan, I thought there were positives. I thought we actually started the better of the sides, moved the ball well. We had some chances as well. Our XG was far better in this game than it has been in a lot of our other games this season, and I feel quite frustrated and hard done by that we came away with a defeat, really.
Yeah, I think this was one of those where I thought the ideas were pretty good. I didn't think there wasn't an awful lot wrong with the game plan. I didn't think. Um, you look at the goal that Swansea score, that's exactly the kind of goal that I don't think they would be scoring a few weeks ago. It's a lovely ball from Waddell to just sort of whip it behind the Stoke defence, and Verbotnik reads it brilliantly and does really well to finish. Um, but I think the execution perhaps at times probably let Swansea down. I saw this mad stat, and I'm not entirely sure if it's true, so I do apologise if it's not. But it's something like Ronaldo hasn't completed a cross for, what is it, the best part of a
It's
year or something.
There's
It's
12 games.
absolute.
It's the Leicester home game at the start of October, but it's still absolutely insane, isn't it?
Right, yeah, no, okay. All right, I'm being. I do apologise then to Ronaldo for being overly harsh there, but
But
yeah, I
I'd say
mean
12
that.
games for a winger though is still bad enough, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's still bad. But I that there I think is the sort of example of a kind of metric that really needs to improve. I think the front three in general, no matter what kind of combination that Swansea have used, hasn't always had the incisiveness that I think it's needed to have. I mean, Ronaldo. I don't want to be too harsh on the lad, but I keep. I was saying this in the press room. I think it was ahead of the Portsmouth game. I can't actually remember the last time I saw him beat a man. I mean, and I don't know if that's confidence. I don't know if he's been told to play a certain way, and it's that. I mean, there's always been questions over his end product. So I accept that, but when I cast my mind back to when he first came to Swansea, and he was like a breath of fresh air, wasn't he? I mean, okay, he looked very raw, and there were still aspects of his game that needed to be worked on. But I just don't see the same player at the moment, and I'm not sure exactly what that's down to. But coming back to my point, I mean, the execution of things needs to be a little bit better, I think, for Swansea. But you could see the way that they were trying. You could see what they were trying to do a lot of the time. It is that kind of moving the ball quickly, breaking the lines, chasing things down when they lose possession, pressing teams. I think we did see that against Stoke. I really do. And you know, first goal they're undone by what's a a really great strike. And the second one, again, I hate to pick on individuals, but I mean, Josh Key for me completely loses his man, and yeah, it's another one where I mean, I thought it was quite interesting. I mean, I wasn't actually there at the fan forum, but I thought it was quite interesting that Vitor Matos mentioned Josh Key. By all accounts, I mean, you were there, Steve. So I mean, you can probably say better than I can about what exactly he said about Josh Key, but he's another player who I don't understand what's happened to. I don't get what's happened to him. He just doesn't look the same player that he looked like. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about how important it was to tie him down to a new contract, and how he could turn out to be one of the best fullbacks in the league. And his confidence has clearly just completely fallen off a cliff, and I'm not entirely sure what the answer is.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned two players there that have to be discussed, really. I mean, the fact that they both play on the same side of the pitch. I mean, it's if you're an opposition team, you're going to target without a doubt. I mean, look, I think with Key, it was mentioned at the fans forum last night, and we need to. Matos was keen to point out that there is a person behind the player, and I agree. I think Josh Key is someone that I like, who has badly lost his way. I feel sorry for him at the moment. I think his confidence is on the floor. I mean, my mentality with him is at the moment, I would take him out the firing line, put an arm around him and say, "Look, things are not going great for you at the moment. You know, it is what it is. Just focus on your training without the pressure of playing for the moment, and we'll look to put you back in for the FA Cup game with West Brom." That's the only way I can really see through it at the moment because I just think every time he plays, his confidence is gone and it's impacting his performances. I mean, he was particularly bad on the weekend. I just felt for him because he just generally had a shocker. Everything he did, it was just mistake after mistake. And look, these things do happen on occasions, but
Mm.
at the same time, he can't be getting picked. I mean, Ronaldo, I've got less sympathy for because I don't know how he's keeping his place in the team. I sort of know with Key, it's the fact of there isn't a lot of backup. Galbraith has played there. He's done a good, decent job there. I don't really want him playing there. I think he needs to play in the middle. And I do think that Sam Parker should have had a couple of games to see how he gets on because I do think there's something there. But Ronaldo, I've reached the stage where I just think he's like a hindrance. It's like playing with
Who
10.
who who comes in for Ronaldo for you?
Anusa, I thought he did well from the bench the other day, and plus, I just think that he is a bit raw, Anusa at times. He hasn't had the impact we may have been looking for at this stage, but at the same time, just persist with it because Ronaldo, I just feel like I've seen more than enough of him over a long period now, and I just don't think it's going to change. So you're learning
Mm.
nothing by playing him. He does work hard. I can't dispute that with him, but his lack of quality is a problem. I mean, I wouldn't be completely against, if I'm honest, either on the left hand side, playing Timon as a left winger because I just think that his delivery is so much better than everybody else's that you could play him further forward and play Samuel Smith at left back. I mean, I don't think that'll happen now because Eoma's form has picked up a little bit the last couple of games, but I think the delivery into the box is a huge Swansea problem. And every
Mm.
time Ronaldo plays, my heart sinks before a ball is kicked because I just think, there we go, there's another day. And when I heard that stat the other day about it being 12 games, I mean, it is bonkers, really. But if you think about it and you remember those games, maybe it isn't as much of a shock as you think it is. But it's incredibly damning because, one of your key jobs as a wide man is to feed the strikers. And he just doesn't do it
Mm.
because his delivery is so poor. So, yeah, but I did think that Anusa had a good cameo the other day, and he certainly should be playing instead of Ronaldo. I mean, Ronaldo, I've just given up on. I just don't think we're ever going to see anything from him other than hard work. Quality wise, forget it, really.
I think I think the thing with the Noosa is in the past, I think, and yeah, it's certainly under Alan Sheehan, I think there were concerns about Inusa's conditioning um, and his ability to cope with the physicality of the championship. Um, the general feeling I got was that people on the training grounds essentially thought, is Inusa capable of playing 90 minutes week in week out in the championship? And I think the kind of feeling was that he wasn't quite there yet. So perhaps he needs to really kind of get up to speed in the championship. And I know that's a difficult thing to hear when we're in the middle of December. But it has been a big step up for him, I think. But as you say, there have been some glimpses. I thought he was good when he came off the bench. And there's clearly a decent player in there somewhere. They've spent a fair amount of money on him. So you know, my hope would be that there's more to come. I'm not entirely sure I'm with you on Ronaldo. I'm not sure I'm so ready to necessarily give up on him because, like I said, I still think there's a fairly decent player there, but I think it's similar with Key for me. I think he just needs a bit of time out of the team, perhaps recalibrate, someone to push him, um, and in a Newsom, maybe he'll get that. I mean, it's kind of a theme really with Swans as well. Is like, I mean, I was discussing this with one of my colleagues last week. I think it was. Swansea have made this decision to effectively take punts on players who plying their trade in foreign leagues and aren't necessarily used to the championship. And you have to say, by and large, I mean, has it worked? I'm not so sure. perhaps you look at Wrexham, who Swansea take on Friday night. They've invested heavily in players who are very, 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 very knowledgeable about this level, knowledgeable about English football. And okay, they're not a million miles ahead of Swansea, but they've taken to life in the Championship really, really well. So it's Friday's going to be kind of a clash of two different approaches in in the transfer market, really.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to be fair, I think what the Swans have tried to do is probably a better model generally because you look at the wages that Wrexham must be paying for quite a lot of players, then you know, we just can't do that, I don't think. And that's probably why Lewis O'Brien has gone there. I can't imagine we could have got close to what they are paying. I think what we've tried to do is, from the FFP point of view, is buy players. And then if you do it over a 4-year contract, for example, then you might only be paying about £1 million a year per player.
That,
And the wages are not so high in it. I guess that's what the idea is, isn't it? But as things stand, has the approach been great? You'd have to say it's mixed at best, wouldn't you, I think?
yeah, I mean, look, I'm absolutely not saying that one approach is better than the other. I just think you kind of need to take elements of both. I think because especially when you're working with the budget that Swansea have been working with in recent years, there's nothing wrong with trying to pick up and coming players from other leagues or even elsewhere in the English league. Look at Ethan Galbraith, was picked up for 1.5 million or whatever it was. And he's come in, slotted in brilliantly, and arguably been Swansea's best player. It does work, but I do think you look at likes of Timon, who's probably also in with a shout of being up there as in terms of Swansea's best performer. He's got pretty large amount of championship experience behind him. Kind of want one or two more Josh Timons in my opinion, but yeah, and then you look at players like Omji Sung, for example. I mean, yes, there's been some flashes and some decent signs in recent weeks, it has to be said. But there's a part of me that kind of thinks, well, how much more time is it going to take before we see him really, really kind of take to the Championship? And I don't think we've really seen it yet. And he's been with the club for quite a long time now. So yeah, it's about finding that balance, isn't it? By all means, go out and pick up some up and coming unknowns, but I do kind of think at the same time the approach of getting that sort of spine together of players who, I mean, I hate to say it because it sounds like a little bit cliche, but like know the Championship. Do you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, I mean, I just think it's been a very, very interesting contrast in approaches from Swansea and Wrexham. It'll be interesting to see how it goes on Friday.
Yeah, I think it will be, and I think sometimes the answer is a blend of both is probably the ideal move, but at the same time, it does depend on the quality of players that you bring in, doesn't it? But
Of course, yeah.
I mean, but before we move on fully from Stoke, like you mentioned about the goal, I mean, that for me was
Mm.
our best goal this season in terms of a move. Great ball from Galbraith to Waddell, the ball in behind the defence. I mean, to be fair to Vipotnik, he's doing pretty well this season in terms of goal return off minimal chances. But he'll dream of chances like that, really, won't he? I mean, it's a striker's bread and butter, and he finished it really well, didn't he?
Yes, yes. I mean, that has been, regardless of everything that's happened this season, the the goal return from Vibotnik's been a huge plus, and I think that's always kind of separated Swansea, I think, from some of the teams around them, and that is in that they do have a goal scorer and a goal scorer who's been scoring goals, as you said, without having much to really feed off. And the quality of the ball from Waddell is fantastic, and it's just that sort of pass that Swansea just weren't doing anywhere near as much as they should be doing in the last few weeks. Certainly before Matos, anyway. Um, so yeah, if you can, my feeling is, I mean, if Robotnik can bash in 9 or 10 goals without much service, if you give him a good level of service, what's to say he can't kick on and score 20, 25? I mean, it's quite exciting to think about, but it's getting there. That's going to be the challenge, and it's nice for Waddell to be involved as well. I think there was quite a lot of fanfare when he signed, wasn't there? And he's been kind of in and out of the team a little bit this season, but he seems to be enjoying a decent little run. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it certainly feels like we're starting to see what he really brings.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd like him to have a run in the team. I mean, from my point of view, I would have started him at the weekend. I mean, I know Cullen did come on and get the goal against Portsmouth, but for me, in a game like that, Cullen would have been better coming off the bench if we needed a goal later on in the game as opposed to starting. But look, the decision was made, and but I think you look at the subs that came on the other day. We touched on Anusa there; he did well. So Waddell again, thought Yalkoué showed something as well. I mean, I think there's a case to say that those three could start on Friday. If I was in charge, I probably would, if I'm honest with you. I don't think Franco had a great game, for example, at Stoke. So I'd be looking at, could we bring Yalkoué in alongside Stamenic? I mean, I'd like Galbraith to play midfield, but I think after the way he played, he really needs to be taken out of the fray, as I've said. So that's not going to happen. But I think those three are pushing now for to start, and that's a good thing because we don't really want to be in a situation where you look at the bench and there's nobody you want to bring on. I mean, we've been in that situation a lot in the last couple of years, but I do think that those guys could play on Friday, and they certainly would if I had my way, really. But as I've said, I don't think Ronaldo should be playing at the moment, so Anusa should certainly come in there, and it would. I feel more optimistic about a result on Friday if we saw those guys given a chance, really. I mean, if you were in charge, what would you look to do on Friday in terms of your team selection?
Oh my gosh. I don't think I would change. I don't think I would change an awful lot. I can see the argument for bringing Anusa in. I really can. Yalkoué, I mean, he's still a bit of an unknown to me. I feel like we really haven't quite seen the very best of him yet, and he's obviously spent a little bit of time out of the picture after that red card against QPR, and it was a very, very silly one, to be honest. Yes, made the most of it. I can't actually remember who he headbutted now off the top of my head, but I say headbutt with inverted commas, obviously. But in any case, I mean, in terms of actual performances, I don't know about you, but I haven't quite seen a player that was playing Champions League football last season, at least not yet. And there's been some promising glimpses, I think, but we haven't. I don't think he's put in a complete performance yet. That's kind of justified a lot of the fanfare that greeted him when he arrived. So yeah, I can understand that. I think he probably will go with Franco and Stamenic again. Even though I kind of agree with the Yalkoué argument to an extent, because I think
I think
in
the
the
other thing
better
is we're
team,
coming into a period now, aren't we, where there's a lot of games, and we are going to see some rotation, aren't we? So I think that's partly my thinking as well.
it is, yeah, but I think I don't. I mean, it all depends on how Matos feels Wrexham are going to go about things, and I think the obvious kind of prediction you would make is that they're going to go direct and they're going to be quite physical, which is how they've been for most of the season. And you'd have to say, if that's the approach that you're expecting from Wrexham, that perhaps Stamenic and Franco is going to be the best way to do that, because Yalkoué physically is not the strongest of players. Yes, he's a technically very good in possession, and although, like I said, we haven't necessarily always seen that from him. But I think when you're coming into a physical game against a direct team like Wrexham, you can definitely understand the argument for Stamenic and Franco. But yeah, I think I think the Anusa Ronaldo thing is interesting. I wouldn't at all be surprised if Anusa came in, given his promise off the bench. I think we're going to see Galbraith at right back, as he said. Rest of the back four probably picks itself. I would personally go Vibotnik up front, just because I think he is obviously the man in form right now. Although, I don't know how you feel about Adam Eder, because I actually don't think he's been as bad as some people have made out. I think he's put himself about quite well. He's just obviously not been as clinical as Verbotnik at the moment. But I would personally go with Jan as well. So I wouldn't change an awful lot if I'm being honest. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's any other changes you would make across the starting lineup at all.
I think you're looking at the back four is going to stay the same. I would think, although I'm not against Casey playing. I don't think Cabango and Burgess have been brilliant at times this season. I do think Casey has actually been pretty good when he's come in. There was the mistake at Charlton, but that can happen on occasions. I could see what you're saying about Franco and Stamenic probably being a good pairing against Wrexham, and that is a fair comment. But I do think Yelkoue is unlucky not to have had more minutes. He did make that mistake against QPR, but these things do happen on occasions. I mean, to have not seen him since feels a bit harsh. Or
Mm.
certainly into the last couple of games. Anyway, I know he did have a knock for a bit. I think Waddell should come in for Cullen. I think that Cullen would be better coming off the bench if we need a goal. Like I said, Anusa would have to play for me. I mean, and Ronaldo certainly can't play. And then Eom, I guess, keeps his place, and I'd say Vapotnik keeps his place. I mean, he's definitely the better option. I think Ida's been okay at times, but he's not had a huge impact yet. So I mean,
He's
you know,
he's hindered by that price tag, isn't he? Because
these
he's
things often don't help, do they? I think it's my instinct is that we went in. We probably shouldn't have done that deal, if I'm honest. But I do appreciate as well that we needed a striker, and the board were looking to bring one in, and they backed the manager with one. So I do respect that, but maybe they should have backed out of it. Is my instinct. But he's obviously did score a nice goal at Charlton. We're probably looking for more from him, but what also doesn't help him. So I've got a little bit of sympathy here. Is that Vipotnik, who wasn't great before his arrival, sort of then seemed to wake up a bit and has been a better player since. So it's been difficult for him to get minutes then, isn't it?
Yeah, it has. But I mean, I- if you're coming in with that price tag, and I know it's not his fault that Swansea paid so much, but if you're coming in, you've got to be aware that the expectation on you is going to be high, and so you've got to be kind of ready to sort of fight for your place, especially if the lad you're up against is banging goals in. So yes, I have some sympathy to an extent, but I mean, you can't just, even when you come in with that price tag, you can't just assume you're going to start games just because of the amount of money the club has spent on you. Particularly, as I said, Verbotnik's so in form at the moment, and I see what you're saying about it. I think a lot of people kind of not forget, but perhaps underestimate where Verbotnik was when before Ida came in. I mean, the club, from what I understand, were pretty open to selling Verbotnik before he went on that incredible run, and it was very quickly decided that he perhaps there was something he could offer. But they're two different profiles as well. I mean, I think Ida for me is a bit better on the ball. I think he's a bit more composed in possession, whereas Verbotnik, I think, he is the sort of, I hesitate to use the word target man because he's not really a target man, but he's someone who can get on the end of chances rather than hold things up and bring others into play. I think Ida's a bit better at doing that. But certainly Ida, if he's going to get in ahead of Verbotnik, he's going to have to start scoring or adding more goals to his game. But yeah, I think he's definitely got a part to play over the running, and you do make a good point about the level of rotation that's going to be needed over the festive period. That certain players are going to need their minutes managed. Waddell, I think, is a good shout, just because he brings a little bit more mobility on the ball. I'm not sure Cullen does offer. Cullen, I think, is better out of possession, but Cullen will press and for pretty much 90 minutes or more. I mean, but I think with the ball at his feet, I think Waddell is technically the better player. So yeah, I completely understand that argument.
Yeah, I mean the game in general on Friday. I mean, how do you feel about it? It's the first obviously Swans Wrexham League game, I think since 2003, first game at all since 2006. The first time they've played at the stadium, the last time they came down here was the actual last ever game at the Vetch, so which says a lot for how long ago it was. I mean, if I'm honest, from my point of view, I feel like this game's probably going to get a bit bigged up too much. Whereas, like, it's not, I said it's called a derby, but it's not really from my point of view. I mean, I can't say I'm particularly nervous going into it compared to a Cardiff game where the nerves would really be kicking in already. I think it's more for me about trying to, remind the North Walians that we're the best team in Wales, really, as opposed to anything else. But how do you feel about it? As obviously you work in the media, and I'm sure that there's going to be a bit of conversation about it coming up to the game now on Friday.
Yeah, I think the impression I get is rivalry is definitely there. But as you say, it's not a derby. It's not. I mean, it's not going to have the ferociousness of a South Wales derby, certainly. But I definitely think there is a, there is an element of Swans fans who will definitely want to make a point to Wrexham, because obviously Wrexham for the last few years have had a lot of noise around them for very obvious reasons. Swansea have indulged in a bit of that themselves, obviously, with Snoop Dogg and Luka Modric coming on board. But yeah, I do get the feeling that there will be um, some quite a large section of Swans fans that will want to make a point against a side that has obviously flown through the leagues and has become a talking point around the world, really. So yeah, I get that. As for the level of ferociousness about it, I mean, I don't think we'll really know until it happens. Really, yeah, I don't get the feeling there's too much animosity between the two teams. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure the wider media, particularly those outside of Wales, are going to make, as you say, probably a bit more of a deal about this than perhaps it's warranted. But look, Snoop Dogg v Ryan Reynolds is a great way to sell a game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think we're doing the right thing if we try and play on it purely because it's good for the club and it raises publicity, really, and stuff like that. So I do understand it. I mean, just before we finish, I mean, we're going into a hectic period. We'll try and do another podcast next week, but there's never a guarantee. What do you think Swansea will be looking for from the festive period? I mean, there's things of games with Wrexham, Coventry, Oxford, West Brom, and Millwall. I mean, I think 2 wins in there would be a reasonable return, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, an away win would be nice. I can't. I'm not sure I can see them getting that at Coventry, but I guess you never know. I think that Oxford United game will probably be earmarked as a potential 3 points that they can get. But as the old saying goes, there's no easy game in the Championship. West Brom as well on New Year's Day. You would think, God, I think there would be some level of confidence that they get something out of that game as well. But yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to predict at the moment because as I said earlier in the pod, Swansea are not the finished article under Vitor Matos, and there's still plenty of things they need to work on. And how the festive period goes is very much going to depend on how much progress is made within quite a short space of time. Hopefully, the backroom team are going to be in soon. We've not really talked about that too much on this pod, and the impact of that. But having them on board, I think, will be a huge positive. Matos has kind of tried to style out the situation, praised the impact of Leon and Joe. But let's be honest, he'll want his own backroom team in. It'll be a lot easier to get his message across when he's got his own backroom team in, despite what he says about how influential Brits and Alan have been. So that could perhaps be a bit of a factor. But yeah, I think 2 wins from the next 3 or 4 games would be pretty satisfactory, I think.
Yeah, and then obviously you want to make sure there's a draw or two in there as well, wouldn't you? I mean, it wouldn't just
What,
be
draw at Coventry will be lovely.
well, yeah, I wouldn't dispute that one at all. But I mean, you're looking at it'd certainly be nice to beat Wrexham, I think, and then yeah, I mean, I'm going to likely write off Coventry as we're unlikely to get anything, but you'd like to get certainly get positive results, I think, from the other games. And but we will see. I mean, I think we're likely to see rotation as we've touched upon, won't we? For those games, it is a hectic period. I think it's 5 games in 16 days. So yeah, that's a lot of football to be played. Things can turn quickly in that period as well. If you have a good period, we could be looking at towards the top half by that stage. And obviously, if it goes badly, you could be slipping back down the table. So there will be some big winners and losers, I think, in this period. And I certainly hope that we're not one of the losers, but time will tell. Going to wrap up the pod there. Big thanks to Tom for joining us. As I've said, we'll try and get another episode out there before Christmas. But if not, then I wish you all the best for the festive season. Thank you very much for joining us, and bye for now.